Wealth whispers while poverty screams, and Linda Kleena had learned the art of silence long before she learned to speak. The gallery walls held amateur paintings that would never sell, created by artists who would never be famous, displayed for an audience that would never remember them. Linda stood before a canvas splattered with colors that meant nothing, yet somehow meant everything. She wore jeans from a store where people checked price tags twice, a simple black sweater with no designer label, and shoes she had walked in long enough to scuff. Her hair fell naturally around her shoulders, her face bare except for the faintest touch of lip balm. She looked like every other woman in this room, and that was precisely the point. "You see something in that one?" Linda turned. The man beside her had kind eyes and restless hands that could not stay still. Depending on your optimism, he gestured at the painting, an explosion of reds and golds that looked like a sunset or a kitchen fire. "I see someone trying," Linda said, "trying to make sense of chaos and create beauty from confusion." "That is generous," the man smiled. "I see a mess. Mess may be honest. Perfection is the absolute lie." He laughed, not politely, but genuinely. "I am Matt Mercer. Linda Kleena." They shook hands. His grip was firm but not aggressive, confident but not dominating. She noted these things the way someone might mention the weather, casually but with awareness that storms could be coming. "Do you come to these often?" Matt asked. "Gallery openings when I can. I like seeing what people create without trying to impress anyone." "But is that not what art is? Trying to impress? Number?" Linda turned back to the painting. "Art is trying to express. There is a difference." Matt moved beside her, studying the canvas with renewed interest. "You talk like someone who thinks deeply about things." "I talk like someone who has learned that surface level gets you nowhere meaningful." "Cryptic." Matt's eyes sparkled. "I like cryptic." For the next hour they wandered through the gallery together. Matt talked about his work, which involved planning, coordination, and deadlines, which Linda listened to without asking too many questions. He had ambition in his voice, hunger in his gestures, dreams painted across every sentence. He wanted to build something meaningful, he said. He wanted to matter. Linda asked questions that revealed nothing about herself. Where did he grow up? What made him choose his path? What did he value most? Matt answered everything with openness that felt both refreshing and slightly naive. "What about you?" Matt finally asked as they stood before the last painting, a simple landscape that captured loneliness. "What do you do?" Linda had rehearsed this answer 100 times. "I am figuring that out, and figuring it out, trying to understand what I am meant to contribute. What matters beyond just existing?" Matt nodded slowly. "That is brave. Most people take whatever job pays the bills and call it a life. And you? Me?" Matt's chest expanded slightly. "I am building towards something bigger, climbing, and making my mark." There it was, that quality Linda had seen in so many people. Not greed precisely, but hunger. There is a need to prove something to someone, maybe to themselves. She found it endearing in its honesty, dangerous in its blindness. "What mark do you want to leave?" Linda asked. Matt paused, considering. "I want people to know I existed and did something that lasted beyond my own life, that I took care of the people I love and gave them everything they deserve." "Everything they deserve," Linda echoed. "Or everything you think they should want." The question landed between them like a stone in still water. Matt blinked, caught off guard by the gentle challenge in her voice. "I never thought about the difference," he admitted. "Most people do not." They moved toward the exit together, the gallery emptying around them. Outside, the evening had turned cool, streetlights beginning their nightly ritual of pushing back darkness. "Can I walk you somewhere?" Matt asked. "Or call you a ride?" "I am fine walking. I like the night." "Then can I walk with you? Just a few blocks." Linda smiled. Just a few blocks. They walked in comfortable silence initially, their footsteps falling into rhythm without effort. Matt kept glancing at her, as if trying to solve a puzzle he had only realized existed. "You are different," he said finally. "Different? How?" "You do not fill silence with noise. You do not try to impress. You just are." "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" It is terrifying, Matt said, but he was smiling. Most people I meet, I figure out in 5 minutes. You, I could talk to you for 5 hours and still feel like I am standing at the edge of an ocean. Linda felt something warm bloom in her chest. Not just attraction, but recognition. With his hunger, dreams, and restless hands, this man saw her as mysterious. Not because she was hiding, but because he sensed depth. Oceans are worth diving into, Linda said softly. Matt stopped walking. They stood beneath a streetlight that cast everything in amber. Can I see you again? Actually, I see you, not just accidentally running into you. You could tomorrow. Coffee. Under coffee sounds perfect. Matt pulled out his phone. What is your number? Linda recited it slowly, watching him type with focus that suggested this number mattered more than most. When he finished, he looked up at her with something vulnerable. I have been waiting for this conversation, Matt said. Like everything up until tonight was just preparation. Linda felt her heart constrict. Here was sincerity. Here was a man saying something real, offering something genuine. And here was she, holding back an entire world he could not imagine. Tomorrow, she said, the cafe on Maple Street, morning. I will be there. They stood for another moment, neither quite ready to break the spell. Then Matt did something unexpected. He extended his hand again, formal, respectful. Thank you for tonight, he said, for seeing something in that mess of a painting, for talking to a stranger, for being you. Linda took his hand. Thank you for asking what I saw, instead of telling me what I should see. She walked away before the moment could become anything else. Before her courage could falter, she could second-guess the decision in her mind. She would give him the truth of her heart. Everything else, the buildings with her family's name, the accounts that could buy galleries like the one they had met in, the influence that made people's voices change, all of that could wait. 3 blocks later, when she was sure he could not see, Linda stood at the corner and looked back the way she had come. Matt was still there, beneath the streetlight, watching the space where she had been, his hands in his pockets. His expression caught between joy and wonder. Linda pulled out her phone and called someone who had been waiting for this call her entire life. Mom, darling, how was the gallery? I met someone. Her mother's pause was delicate, knowing, and then, and I'm going to see where this goes, really see, without all the rest of it clouding everything. That is brave, Linda. Or stupid. Sometimes they are the same thing. Her mother's voice carried warmth that felt like arms around her shoulders. Remember, whoever he falls in love with, make sure it is you. That is the plan. Linda ended the call and looked up at the building beside her. 47 floors of glass, steel, and ambition, the penthouse on top holding everything she had walked away from tonight. Tomorrow, she would return to her modest apartment across town. Tomorrow, she would meet Matt at a cafe and drink coffee that cost less than the earrings she had left on her dresser. Tomorrow, she would continue this experiment in truth. But tonight, standing between two, Linda took the flowers, their stems still damp, their petals uneven but vibrant. They are perfect. They sat across from each other in a corner booth, coffee steaming between them like a barrier neither was quite ready to cross. Matt talked, nervous energy spilling into words about his morning, the route he had taken here, and how he had almost worn a different shirt before deciding that overthinking clothing was ridiculous. You are nervous, Linda observed gently. Terrified, Matt admitted. I do not usually feel this way. What way? Like something important is happening, and I need not mess it up. What if you cannot mess it up? Linda stirred sugar into her. There you go again, Matt laughed, turning my brain inside out. They talked for 2 hours without noticing time passing. Matt told her about growing up in a house full of love, but empty of extras. Parents who worked hard to ensure their children had opportunities they had never possessed. He spoke about wanting to honor that sacrifice, to build something that would make his family. I want you to see me choosing to be here. This is where I want to be, not because I have nowhere else. Matt reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. Please tell me something that might sound strange. Ask. You do not talk about yourself much, Matt said as they watched ducks navigate a pond that probably violated several health codes. What do you want to know? Everything. Start any. Matt and Linda constructed a relationship from small moments. Shared meals in diners where the food was terrible, but the company Derek looked her over with eyes that appraised everything. The mysterious girlfriend. She is exploring her options. Nothing wrong with that. Of course not, Derek said quick. Do you see me, Matt? Really see me? Matt, everything runs smoothly. Take your time. Linda smiled at the truth hidden in plain sight. Yes, everything ran smoothly. She had built systems specifically so it could, so she could stand on sidewalks kissing men who thought she needed protection. Men who could not imagine that she held influence that could reshape their entire world with a signature. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, 4 floors up, had no elevator, and had walls thin enough to hear neighbors arguing. She felt content in this small space. Matt thought this was her life. Matt thought he was seeing all of her. And maybe, Linda thought as she arranged the wildflowers in a jar that had once held pasta sauce, perhaps the version of herself that lived here was the truest. The woman who wore the crown was the disguise, and the woman who climbed these stairs was the revelation. Her phone buzzed. Matt, thank you for tonight, every night, and for being you. Linda typed back, thank you for seeing me. But as she hit send, she wondered which version of herself she was thanking him for seeing. The one he thought he knew, or she kept locked in buildings he would never enter. The proposal came on an ordinary morning that became extraordinary without warning. The transformation that makes you believe in magic, even when you have learned better. Matt had suggested a walk through the park where they had first kissed. Nothing unusual, just time together before the day demanded their separate attentions. Linda wore comfortable clothes, her hair pulled back against the wind that could not decide which direction it preferred. They walked past joggers chasing health they would abuse by evening, past families teaching children that grass was meant for rolling in, past elderly couples who had forgotten they were supposed to have become strangers after so many years together. Can we sit? Matt asked, gesturing toward the bench where they had spent hours talking about everything except the things that mattered most. Linda sat, noticing that Matt's hands had that restless quality again, which meant nervousness or excitement, or both tangled together. I have been thinking, Matt began, then stopped. Started again. I have been thinking about the future, about what I want my life to look like when I am old enough that walking in parks feels like an accomplishment. That is oddly specific, Linda said gently. I want it to look like this, Matt gestured between them. Like us. Like mornings that do not need plans because the company is the point. Linda's heart began beating in a rhythm that felt like anticipation and dread playing the same instrument. Matt slid off the bench, kneeling on grass that would stain his pants, pulling a small box from his pocket with hands that trembled just enough to be honest. Linda clean. I do not have much. I do not have the kind of security that lets me promise you everything, but I have love that is real and commitment that will not waver, and the absolute certainty that you are the best thing that has ever happened to my life. He opened the box. The ring inside was modest, a simple band with a diamond small enough to be practical, beautiful enough to mean something. Linda knew he had saved for this and sacrificed others' wants to afford this small symbol. Will you marry me? Matt asked, his voice breaking on the question. Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving I am worthy of you? Linda looked at the ring, the man offering it, and the life he imagined they would build together. She saw love in his eyes, genuine, vulnerable, entirely sure. She also saw the shadow of assumption, that she needed this security, that marriage to him was a rescue, that her yes would be gratitude as much as affection. But beneath the assumption, she saw the man she had fallen for, the one who brought her wildflowers and listened when she spoke and cried about his father on park benches, the one who was offering everything he had because he genuinely believed she deserved it. Yes, Linda said, tears spilling before she could control them. Yes, Matt, I will marry you. Matt slid the ring onto her finger with reverence, then pulled her into an embrace that felt like promises, futures, and hope that reality had not yet crushed. Linda held him tight, feeling his solid warmth, the beating of his heart against hers, and the absolute certainty that this moment was beautiful and devastating. I will take care of you, Matt whispered into her hair. I promise, You will not have to worry about anything." Linda closed her eyes against the ache of those words. "I know you will." They sat on that bench for another hour. Matt was talking excitedly about their future, the apartment they would find together, the life they would build, the family they might create. Linda listened, nodded, and smiled, feeling the weight of her ring and secrets pressing down with equal force. That evening, Matt called his family. Linda listened to his joy spill through the phone, hearing his mother's tears, his sister's squeals, and his brother's congratulations. When he handed her the phone, Linda spoke to people who welcomed her with open arms and hearts that did not know enough to be guarded. "We cannot wait to meet you properly," Matt's mother said, her voice warm as summer. "Matt talks about you like you hung the moon." "He is generous with his interpretations," Linda replied softly. "No, honey, he is in love. There is a difference." After the calls ended, Matt pulled Linda close on the couch in her small apartment. "I want to do this right. The proposal, the engagement, all of it. You did do it right. I mean the celebration. I want to throw a party, invite people, and show the world I am the luckiest man alive." Linda felt something cold touch her spine. "Matt, we do not need a party. This is enough. But I want to." Matt's enthusiasm was genuine, unstoppable. "I want my colleagues to meet you properly. I want to celebrate this with everyone who matters. Please." Linda looked at his face, saw how much this meant to him, and understood that his need for public celebration came from openly wanting to claim this joy. How could she deny him that? "Okay," she said quietly. "A party? Really?" Matt kissed her suddenly and joyfully. "I will plan everything. You have to show up and be the incredible woman you are." Over the following weeks, Matt threw himself into planning with the focus he usually reserved for work. He researched venues, booked a ballroom at a hotel that cost more than he should have spent, and arranged catering that would impress people who did not need impressing. Linda watched him work himself into exhaustion, chasing the perfect celebration. She offered several times to contribute, to help with costs that she could cover without thinking. But Matt refused with pride that was both admirable and frustrating. "I have got this," he would say firmly. "This is my responsibility, my joy to give you." Linda did not argue. She recognized male pride when she saw it, understood that Matt needed to feel like he was providing, that his sense of worth was tangled up in his to give her things he thought she needed. The invitations went out. Matt's colleagues and friends received elaborate cards announcing the engagement. Linda received a copy in the mail, addressed to her modest apartment, announcing her engagement to a man who thought he knew her, inviting her to a celebration that would reveal how little he saw. She stood in her closet, the small one in this small apartment, and chose the simplest dress she owned. Black, elegant, understated. No jewelry except the engagement ring. Nothing that would draw attention or suggest anything beyond the ordinary. Across town, in a closet that could hold her entire apartment, Linda's real wardrobe hung in temperature-controlled darkness. Gowns are worth more than Matt's car, jewelry that requires insurance policies. The wardrobe of Linda Cleany, heir to an empire that had been building itself since before Matt was born. Linda closed the door on that world and chose simplicity. She would go to this party as the woman Matt had proposed to. She would smile and celebrate and let him have his moment of pride. And after, well, after would take care of itself. After all, I did. The night before the party, Linda stood at the window of her modest apartment, looking at the city spread below her like possibilities written in light. Her phone rang, her mother. "Are you sure about this?" her mother asked without preamble. "No," Linda admitted, "but I am sure about him. Beneath everything else, I am sure about who he could be. And if he cannot become that person?" Linda touched the ring on her finger. It was small, honest, and chosen with love if not understanding. "Then at least I will know I tried and gave him the chance to love me without all the complications." Darling, you are the complication. The wealth, the influence, that is part of you. You cannot separate yourself from it forever. I know. Linda's voice was barely audible for a while longer. "I want to be loved for being me, just me." Her mother was quiet for a long moment. "Then I hope he proves worthy of you, all of you." After the call ended, Linda sat in darkness and let herself imagine two futures. In one, Matt discovered the truth and loved her anyway. Loved her more for the honesty of what she had been trying to protect. In the other, She would learn that some people could only love the versions of you they felt superior to. The engagement ring caught light from the street below, throwing tiny rainbows against the wall, like promises that might shatter before morning. The ballroom glittered with ambition disguised as celebration, chandeliers throwing light that cost more per hour than honesty could afford. Linda arrived alone. Matt had gone early to ensure everything was perfect, to greet guests, to play host in a role that fit him like clothing borrowed from someone else's life. She stood at the entrance in her simple black dress, watching people who measured worth in titles and salaries gathered to celebrate something they could not begin to understand. The room buzzed with conversation that went nowhere meaningful. Matt's colleagues clustered near the bar, their laughter too loud, their ties slightly loosened, their confidence built on foundations that would crumble under inspection. Derek held court, telling stories that made him the hero. Troy kept checking his phone like messages were oxygen. Cameron flirted with a woman who looked interested until she asked what he drove. Linda. Matt appeared at her side, radiant with joy, making her chest tighten. He kissed her cheek, took her hand, pulled her into the room like she was a treasure he could not wait to display. "You look beautiful." "So do you," Linda said softly and meant it. Matt wore a suit he had bought for tonight, probably stretching his budget beyond wisdom. But he carried it well, his excitement making him shine despite the expense. "Meet everyone properly," Matt said, guiding her toward his colleagues. The evening progressed through standard celebration rituals. People congratulated them with smiles that did not quite reach their eyes. Gifts appeared on a table, wrapped boxes containing picture frames, serving dishes, and things that belonged in their lives. Linda was not sure they would actually build. Dinner was served with the kind of elegance from someone trying too hard. Champagne flowed in quantities that suggested Matt had prioritized alcohol over practical concerns. The volume in the room increased with each bottle emptied. Linda sat at the head table beside Matt, playing the role of glowing bride-to-be, answering questions about wedding plans with vague enthusiasm. Matt's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently, his touch reminding her why she had said yes. Then the speeches began. Matt's brother spoke first, sharing warm stories about growing up together and Matt's determination, loyalty, and heart. Linda smiled genuinely, seeing the man she loved through someone else's affection. Derek went next, his speech veering between genuine friendship and performative humor. He told stories about Matt at work, late nights, demanding clients, and victories earned through persistence. The room laughed at appropriate moments. Then Matt stood up, glass in hand, confidence radiating from him like heat from a flame about to burn everything it touched. "Thank you all for coming," Matt began, his voice carrying across the room easily. "Thank you for being here to celebrate the best thing ever happening to me." Applause rippled through the crowd. Linda smiled up at him, her face aching from holding the expression. "This woman beside me," Matt continued, gesturing toward Linda with his glass, "is extraordinary. She is kind and intelligent, and sees the world in ways that constantly surprise me." Linda felt warmth bloom despite her anxiety. This may be fine. Perhaps he would celebrate their love without complications. Matt said, "This is my fiancé, everyone." His tone shifted into something that made Linda's stomach clench. "She does not work yet, but do not worry, I will take care of her." The room erupted with friendly, thoughtless laughter that assumed everyone was in on the same joke. Linda's smile did not falter. She had too much practice controlling her expression to let it slip now, but something behind her eyes went very still. Matt did not notice. He was riding the wave of attention, feeding off the crowd's energy like a man starving for validation. "After we are married, she will not have to stress about anything," Matt continued, his voice carrying pride that felt like acid on Linda's skin. "I have got this." More laughter. Derek shouted something about being a lucky girl. Troy raised his glass in salute. Cameron called out, setting the bar high, "Mercer." Matt grinned, absorbing the approval, never once looking down at Linda. Never once did he see that the woman he loved was dying quietly beside him, while he stood over her, making jokes. Seriously, though, Matt said, his tone attempting sincerity. "I know she is still figuring out what she wants to do with her life, and that is okay. That is what partnership is about, supporting each other. When one of us needs carrying, The other steps up. Linda's hand found her water glass. She drank slowly, mechanically, while screaming echoed in the space behind her teeth that politeness would not let her open. Matt finished his speech with words about love, the future, and commitment. Words that would have meant everything if he had not just spent 5 minutes reducing her to a dependent, to someone incomplete without his intervention, to a problem he was generous enough to solve. The applause when he sat down was thunderous. Matt leaned over and kissed her temple, whispering, "Did I do okay?" Linda turned to look at him, really look at him, and saw a stranger wearing the face of someone she thought she loved. "You did exactly what you intended," she said quietly. Matt did not hear the double meaning. He was already turned away, accepting congratulations from people at nearby tables, basking in approval that cost Linda everything it meant to give. The party continued for another 2 hours. Linda moved through it like a ghost, present but untethered, smiling, nodding, and dying incrementally with each congratulation. People kept telling her how lucky she was, how Matt was such a good man, how wonderful it must be to have someone so willing to provide. Not one person asked what she might give him. Not one person considered that she brought value beyond the opportunity for his generosity. As the evening wound down, Matt and his friends gathered near the bar, their voices loud with alcohol and camaraderie. Linda watched them from across the room and studied how they congratulated each other on Matt's engagement, like he had won a competition, like acquiring a wife was an achievement to be celebrated, separate from the actual human being involved. The hotel manager approached Linda discreetly as people began filtering out. "Miss Clean, there is a bill matter." Linda glanced toward the bar where Matt stood, oblivious, assuming everything was handled because he had made arrangements he thought he could afford. She knew without checking that he had underestimated costs, that the bar tab alone probably exceeded his budget, that come morning he would wake to credit card bills that would take months to navigate. "Of course," Linda said quietly. She opened her small purse that matched her simple dress, looked ordinary, held extraordinary things, and produced a black card with no spending limit. "Please, charge everything to this." The manager took the card, glanced at the name embossed in silver, and his eyes widened slightly before professional training smoothed his expression. "Certainly, Miss Clean. I will process this immediately." "Please," Linda added, her voice carrying weight that made the manager stand straighter. "Do not mention this to anyone, especially not to Mr. Mercer. Let him believe whatever he needs to consider." "Understood completely." The manager disappeared. Linda stood alone in the emptying ballroom, watching Matt laugh with his friends, watching him celebrate a future he thought he understood, and be utterly certain of realities that were about to reshape themselves around him. She did not approach him. She did not say goodbye. She walked out of the ballroom, through the hotel lobby, into the night that felt colder than it had any right to be. Linda's car waited where she had left it. Not the modest sedan Matt had seen her drive, but the vehicle she kept for nights when pretending felt impossible. She slid into leather seats that cost more than most people spent on entire cars, and sat in darkness, not starting the engine, not moving, just breathing. Her phone buzzed. "Matt. Where did you go?" "Come back. Night is not over." Linda looked at the message, at the exclamation points that demonstrated his complete failure to read the room he had just destroyed. She typed 4 words. "Heading home. Love you." The lie felt necessary. The truth would come soon enough. Sunday moved through hours that felt syrupy and wrong, time behaving like something that had forgotten its proper function. Linda stood in her penthouse kitchen, making coffee she would not drink, going through motions that mimicked normalcy while her mind processed everything with surgical precision. Her phone buzzed periodically with messages from Matt, sweet texts about what a perfect night it had been, how happy he was, how much he loved her. Each message landed like a weight on a scale tipping toward inevitability. She did not respond beyond single words. Yes, good, later. Matt did not notice the difference. His joy made him blind. Or perhaps he had always been blind and she had mistaken it for innocence. By afternoon, Linda had made her decision. She called her chief operating officer, Diane, who who had worked with Linda's family for decades and understood that sometimes compassion required cruelty. "I need employment files," Linda said without preamble. "Which ones?" Linda rattled off the names: Matt Mercer, Derek Lansing, Troy Whitmore, Cameron Hayes. She spelled each name carefully, watching the city sprawl beneath her windows like a game board where she had just decided to move pieces that she did not know where they were being moved. "Personnel action?" Diane asked, her voice neutral. "Termination effective Monday. Standard severance. No cause listed beyond restructuring. Please keep it clean." Diane was quiet for 3 seconds, long enough to understand this was personal, but professional enough not to ask. "I will have the packets ready by morning. Do you want HR to handle the notification, or will I handle it personally?" "Understood." Diane hesitated, then added gently, "Linda, are you certain?" Linda looked down at her left hand where the engagement ring had sat yesterday, and simultaneously looked at the bare finger that felt lighter and heavier. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life." She ended the call and moved through the rest of Sunday in crystalline clarity. She showered in a bathroom where the fixtures cost more than most people's cars. She dressed in comfortable clothes that looked cheap but were not, the kind of wealthy person camouflage that rich people wore when they wanted to move through the world without being recognized. She stood at her window and watched sunset bleed across the city, lights begin their nightly bloom, and people move through lives they thought they controlled. Matt called as the evening settled. Linda let it ring twice before answering. "Hey, beautiful," his voice radiated joy. "I have been thinking about last night, how perfect everything was, and how lucky I am." "It was memorable," Linda said quietly. "I know you left early. You okay? You seemed a little quiet during my speech." "I was tired, long day." Matt missed the flatness in her tone. "I totally get it. Hey, want to grab brunch tomorrow? Celebrate properly? Just the two of us?" "I cannot tomorrow. I have something I need to handle." "What kind of something?" Linda looked at her reflection in the window, ghost-like, translucent, caught between who she had been pretending to be and who she actually was. "Just something that I cannot wait for. We will talk soon." "Okay." Matt's disappointment was audible but not suspicious. "Love you." "I know you do," Linda said, which was not the same as saying it back, but was close enough that Matt would not notice the difference. After the call ended, Linda stood in her darkness and let herself feel everything she had been suppressing. Rage at Matt's casual diminishment, grief for the relationship she had believed could transcend surfaces, shame at her own complicity in building an illusion that was always destined to shatter. But beneath those feelings, something more complex. Clarity. Understanding that love built on false foundations would eventually collapse. Recognition that Matt had loved a version of her that did not exist meant he had never actually loved her. She pulled out her laptop and began typing instructions for Monday, detailed protocols for how the terminations would proceed, what would be said, and what would not. She outlined exactly how she wanted HR to handle the process, the timeline for badge deactivation, and the security measures that would ensure dignity even in dismissal. Diane responded to each instruction with confirmation, never once questioning the decisions. This was necessary, even if it was tangled with personal wounds that would scar tissue and no contract could heal. At midnight, Linda closed her laptop and returned to the windows. The city had settled into its late-night rhythm. Fewer lights, more shadows, the hour when truth felt possible because fewer people were awake to deny it. Her phone buzzed one last time. "Mad. Dreaming of our future. Cannot wait to build it with you." Linda did not respond. She stood at her window until dawn began its slow crawl across the horizon. Stood there while night surrendered to day, watching the sun rise on the morning when Matt Mercer would discover that the woman he had thought needed saving owned the ground he stood on. When first light touched the highest buildings, Linda was dressed with care, a professional suit tailored perfectly. Understated jewelry whispered wealth to people who knew how to hear it, and her hair pulled back with severity that matched her mood. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw Linda Cleany, not the modest woman who climbed stairs to small apartments, but the woman who signed documents that moved millions, who sat on boards that shaped policy, who carried her family's legacy in her spine and her grandmother's steel in her gaze. She walked to her kitchen counter where the engagement ring still sat, throwing morning light, picked it up, and studied it one final time. Such a small thing to represent such significant assumptions. She placed it in a velvet box she would leave with Matt's belongings, closed the lid on what could have been, if only he had seen her. Linda left her penthouse as the city woke fully, and rode her private elevator down to the garage where her actual car waited. It was sleek, expensive, and unmissable. She drove across town to Klein headquarters, parked in the spot that had been hers since she was old enough to understand what ownership meant. Diane met her at the elevator with files, coffee, and an expression that conveyed sympathy without being unprofessional. Everything is ready. HR is standing by. Security has been briefed. They can be here within 10 minutes of your call. Good. Linda took the files and flipped through the documentation that would end 4 careers with signatures that would not even slow her hand. Contact the subsidiary and have them send badge deactivation notices exactly at 9, not a minute before. Done. Linda walked to her office, the real one, 40 floors up, with views that made people understand why eagles chose heights. She sat at her desk and waited for 9 with the patience of someone who had spent their whole life learning that influence was nothing if you did not know when to use it. Her phone buzzed with frantic messages starting at 9 o'clock. Matt, something is wrong with my badge, cannot get in. Security says I am deactivated. Derek in a group chat. What the hell? Anyone else locked out? Troy, me too. This has to be a mistake. Cameron, calling HR now. This is wild. Linda watched the messages pile up, watched panic spread through digital communication, watched men who had felt secure 15 minutes ago realize that security was always an illusion. At 9:15, her phone rang. Matt. She let it ring 4 times before answering. Linda, thank God, something crazy is happening at work. They are saying I am terminated, but that is impossible. I need to, Matt. Linda interrupted gently. It is not a mistake. Silence on the other end. Then what? Go to Klein headquarters, top floor. Tell security that Miss Cleany is expecting you. Bring Derek, Troy, and Cameron. You will all receive answers together. Klein headquarters. Why would? Linda, what is going on? You will understand soon. Linda's voice carried no emotion, no hint of the woman who had stood in galleries looking at honest messes. 30 minutes. Do not be late. The elevator doors opened with a sound like a tomb unsealing, and 4 men stepped into a hallway that cost more per square foot than most people earned in months. Matt entered first, his confusion evident in how his eyes tried to map this unfamiliar territory. Derek followed with false bravado, already crumbling at the edges. Troy kept glancing around like the walls might attack. Cameron's confidence had abandoned him somewhere between the lobby and this floor that existed in a different atmosphere than the one where ordinary people breathed. Security escorted them down corridors lined with portraits of industry founders, men and women who had shaped the city's bones, who had built empires from vision and steel and a willingness to make decisions that destroyed small worlds to create larger ones. Their faces stared down with expressions that knew precisely what influence cost and what it bought. The final doors were made of solid oak, imported from somewhere still with forests, carved with geometric patterns that suggested order while hiding chaos. Security opened them without ceremony, gestured for the men to enter, then closed the doors behind them with a finality that felt like judgment. The boardroom stretched before them, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city that looked small from this height, a table that could seat 20 but held only 1 person. At the head of that table sat a woman in a tailored suit that probably cost more than the engagement party they had attended. Her hair was pulled back with precision that matched the room's lines. Her expression was carved from marble that had forgotten how to feel. Matt stopped walking. The sound from his throat was neither word nor breath, but something between recognition colliding with impossibility, creating noise that defied language. Linda. His voice cracked on her name like glass under pressure. She did not stand, did not smile, did not offer any of the warmth they had built over months of careful construction. She existed in her authority, letting them see her finally, completely, without the filters of modesty and misdirection. "Miss Cleany," Linda said, her voice carrying across the room with weight that made all four men take an involuntary step backward. "Linda Cleany, of Klein Industrial, which owns the parent company that employs you." "Employed you?" Derek laughed, a nervous, disbelieving sound that died when he saw Linda's expression did not change. "This is a joke. Some weird reality show thing. Matt, tell her this is not funny." Matt could not speak. His brain was trying to reconcile the woman who had climbed stairs to a modest apartment with the woman sitting at the head of a table that commanded a room, that commanded a building, that commanded the city visible through windows that framed her like art. "No joke, Mr. Lansing," Linda continued, her gaze shifting to Derek with precision that felt surgical. "Your termination letter is not a joke. Neither is the agreement you signed upon hiring, which you violated by discussing proprietary development details at a public gathering. That alone is grounds for immediate dismissal." Derek's face went pale. "I did not. I was just. You were drinking with colleagues at a bar adjacent to a competitor's known gathering location, speaking loudly about project timelines and client relationships. We have witnesses. We have recordings from security cameras that captured your carelessness. We have legal standing that would survive any challenge you would consider mounting." Troy found his voice. "You are saying you had us fired because we—" Linda interrupted. "I said I exercised authority over personnel decisions in a company I control. Your terminations are legal, documented, and final." Cameron stepped forward, his hands raised in what he probably thought was a peaceful gesture. "Look, Linda, Miss Cleany, whatever this is, can we talk about it? We all made mistakes, but surely—" "Surely what, Mr. Hayes?" Linda's eyebrow raised fractionally. "I should ignore that you have created hostile work environment complaints from 3 different female employees. Complaints that HR documented, but did not escalate because you are friends with people in management. I should pretend I do not know about the expense account irregularities that accounting flagged but never investigated." Cameron's mouth opened and closed without sound. Linda stood finally, the movement drawing every eye because authority in motion commands attention in ways stillness never could. She walked along the windows, her heels clicking against marble imported from mountains that still held snow. "Linda said I did not bring you here to negotiate," her voice softer now but no less absolute. "I got you here so you understand precisely who made this decision and why. So you comprehend fully that the woman you laughed about, the woman you assumed was helpless, the woman whose lack of employment you found so amusing, that woman owns the building you worked in. That woman signs documents that determine whether entire divisions continue to exist. That woman has more influence in her signature than you will accumulate in your lifetime." "Linda, please!" Matt's voice finally broke through shock into desperate pleading. "I do not understand what is happening. Why are you doing this?" Linda turned to face him directly for the first time, and something flickered behind the marble. Not warmth exactly, but recognition that this man once mattered before he had shown her he could not see past his assumptions. "Do you remember your speech, Matt, at our engagement party?" Matt blinked, confused. "I said I loved you, that I would take care of you. You said I did not work yet. You said I would not have to stress about anything. You told a room full of people I needed your protection, provision, and generosity to survive. I was trying to show how much I cared. Good to know." Linda's voice cut clean. "You were trying to show everyone else how generous you were for tolerating my deficiency. You reduced me to a dependent, to a problem you were noble enough to solve, to someone incomplete without your intervention. That is not, I did not mean. You assumed I was powerless." Linda walked toward him slowly, each step measured. "You laughed with your friends about how lucky I was. You made jokes about carrying my weight. You never once considered that perhaps I was the one holding us both." Derek made a sound. Linda's gaze shifted to him like a blade finding flesh. "Something to add, Mr. Lansing? You played us." Derek's voice held accusation and fear in equal measure. "You pretended to be something you are not. That is fraud or something." "I pretended nothing. I did not correct your assumptions." Linda's expression could have frozen oceans. I wore modest clothes because expensive ones are uncomfortable. I lived in a small apartment because large ones feel empty. I took buses because traffic makes travel insufferable. I never lied about who I was. You decided who I was based on what you thought I lacked. She returned to her position at the head of the table, standing behind her chair like a throne she had inherited and earned simultaneously. Linda said, "Here is what happens now," her voice returning to pure authority. "Your terminations stand. Your severance packages are generous because I am not cruel. I am just done. You will receive recommendations that are honest but not kind. What you do with those things is your concern, not mine." "Linda, I love you." Matt's voice broke completely. "Whatever I did wrong, I love you, and that has to count for something." Linda looked at him. I looked at him and allowed myself one moment of grief for what could have been if he had been different, if she had been braver, if love was ever simple. "You loved someone who did not exist, Matt. You loved the woman you could save, who needed your strength and would be grateful for your generosity. You never loved me." 3 months felt like 3 years when every morning arrived carrying rejection. Matt's apartment had transformed from a home into a cell where walls pressed closer each week, and furniture he could not afford to replace reminded him of lost confidence. He woke each morning to alarm clocks that had stopped mattering because time no longer divided into segments built toward anything. He made coffee, which he barely drank. He updated resumes that generated automated responses apologizing for not responding. The termination on his record glowed like radiation, invisible but contaminating everything it touched. Recruiters saw Clenny, and their voices shifted from interested to professionally distant within sentences. "Can you explain the circumstances?" they would ask, their tone suggesting they already knew the answer would not help. "Restructuring," Matt would say, "is the official language that means nothing and everything." "I see. We will keep you in mind if anything suitable becomes available." Translation: do not call us. Matt had been unemployed for exactly 7 days when Derek stopped answering his calls. Troy lasted 2 weeks before sending a text that blamed Matt for everything, for getting them fired, for dating someone who turned out to be powerful, for somehow not knowing that the modest woman he had loved controlled their professional fates. Cameron disappeared entirely, deleted his social media profiles, and moved to another city where Clenny's influence presumably did not extend. Matt heard through mutual connections that Cameron had found work somewhere smaller, somewhere that did not ask too many questions. By month 2, Matt had burned through his savings, covering rent on an apartment he should have downsized from immediately. Pride kept him there initially, refusing to admit defeat, clinging to remnants of the life he had built before it revealed itself as temporary. However, pride was not paying bills, and landlords did not accept ego as currency. He took whatever work appeared, contract positions that lasted 3 weeks, freelance projects that paid barely enough to justify the effort, gigs that would have humiliated him before humility became something he had learned against his will. He worked retail during the holiday season, his feet aching from standing, his smile plastic from pretending enthusiasm for purchases that meant nothing. He saw Linda once during this period, entirely by accident, in a part of the city he had no reason to be in, except that coffee from the expensive shop was free if you caught them before they threw out yesterday's grounds. She emerged from a building whose lobby dripped marble and meaning, flanked by people in suits that cost more than his current monthly income. Linda wore confidence like some women wore perfume, invisibly but unmistakably. Her hair was different, pulled back in ways that suggested someone styled it professionally each morning. She carried herself with innate authority, but Matt now knew it was cultivated through generations of people who had learned that influence was something you claimed with your posture. Their eyes met across an impossible distance. Linda's expression did not change, soften, or harden. She looked at him like you would look at someone you used to know in a context that no longer existed. Then she slid into a car that cost more than he would earn in several years, and the vehicle pulled away from the curb with the silence that only expensive things achieved. Matt stood on that sidewalk with free coffee grounds, understanding that he had lost something he had never possessed. You could not lose what you had never seen. You could only grieve the illusion of having held it. He went back to his apartment and cried for the first time since his father's funeral. Not delicate tears that could be dabbed away, but ugly sobbing that came from beneath pride, beneath ego, beneath every defense he had constructed to protect himself from recognizing his own smallness. When the tears ended, his throat ached and his eyes burned. Matt looked around his apartment at furniture that was nice but not meaningful, at decorations that suggested taste without having any, at a life that had looked complete but was actually just cluttered, and made a decision. He called his landlord that afternoon. "I need to break my lease. There is a penalty. I understand. Bill me. I will figure it out." He found a studio apartment in a neighborhood where success had not yet gentrified existence, where people worked multiple jobs and still smiled at each other in hallways, and where community was built from necessity rather than chosen from options. The rent was a third of what he had been paying. The space fit his bed and not much else. It was perfect. Matt sold his furniture, his entertainment system, and his car, which he had been making payments on since before payments felt like chains. He kept only what fit in his new space, and left his old illusions in the dumpster where they belonged. Stripped of everything he had thought mattered, Matt discovered something terrifying. He had no idea who he actually was. The version of himself he had constructed, ambitious project manager, generous fiancé, man on his way to significance, had been built from job titles, relationships, and acquisitions that had been taken away or revealed as fantasies. Without those external markers, he was just a person who had been cruel to someone kind and was now suffering appropriate consequences. Month 3 arrived with winter's first severe cold. Matt walked to the library because his studio did not have space for books, and the library had heat. He spent hours there not reading anything specific, just existing in a space that expected nothing from him except basic human decency. One afternoon, a flyer on the bulletin board caught his attention. A community development assistant and a non-profit housing advocate are needed. Pay is minimal, impact is everything. Matt stared at that flyer for 15 minutes. Minimal pay meant poverty-level wages. Non-profit meant no prestige, advancement track, or cocktail party conversations about impressive-sounding responsibilities. It meant real work, helping real people in real ways that would not inflate his ego or his bank account. He pulled out his phone and called the number on the flyer. "Hello." The voice sounded harried, and the background noise suggested chaos as standard operating procedure. "I'm calling about the development assistant position. Do you have nonprofit experience? Number. Community organizing background? Number. Why are you calling?" Matt paused, considering lying, then remembered lying had gotten him nowhere good. "Because I need to learn what matters, and working with people who know might teach me." Silence on the other end. Then, "Can you start tomorrow?" "Yes, be here at 7. Bring work gloves. We are building planter boxes for a community garden." "Pay is minimal, no benefits for 3 months. You are competing with people who actually need this job. So if you are looking for redemption tourism, save us both the time." "I am not," Matt said, and realized as he said it that it was true. "I am looking for work that matters more than I do. 7 tomorrow. Do not be late." The call ended. Matt looked at his phone, at the address he had been given in a neighborhood he had never visited on purpose, and felt something shift in his chest. Not hope exactly. Hope was too ambitious, too forward-looking. This was simpler. Willingness. Willingness to show up. Desire to be small. Willingness to serve instead of being served. Morning comes with the cold that reminds you that comfort is a luxury, not a right. Matt stood outside a converted warehouse in a neighborhood where broken glass glittered alongside broken promises, where hope was something you built with your hands because it would not arrive any other way. The sign above the door read Riverside Community Advocates in letters that had been painted over graffiti that would probably return by next week. Inside smelled like coffee that was strong because it had to compensate for being cheap, and the purpose that made up for lack of resources through sheer stubborn determination. People moved through the cramped space with efficiency, born from understanding that wasted motion meant wasted opportunity to help someone who needed help. A woman introduced herself, mid-40s, exhausted eyes, a smile that suggested she had seen enough disappointment to recognize it approaching. "I am Valerie. I run this disaster." "Matt Mercer, that is me." Valerie looked him over with an assessment that probably saw through whatever he was trying to project. "Do you know anything about community organizing?" "Nothing." "Construction?" "Less than nothing." "Why are you here?" Matt thought about lying, about spinning some story that would make him sound noble, and then remembered that nobility had been his problem all along. "Because I spent my life being self-important, and it turns out I was just selfish. I am trying to learn the difference." Valerie studied him for 3 seconds, which felt like a cross-examination, and then nodded once. "Honest. That is rare. Grab gloves from that box. You are on the build crew. We are constructing raised beds for elderly residents who want to grow vegetables but cannot bend to ground level. Questions? Where do I start? By doing precisely what you are told without trying to improve the process. People like you always think you have better ideas than folks doing this work for decades. You do not. Listen more than you talk." Matt spent that first day hauling lumber and following instructions from people who knew exactly what they were doing and had no patience for incompetence disguised as enthusiasm. His hands blistered despite gloves. His back screamed by lunch. His pride took a continuous beating from corrections delivered by people who cared more about results than his feelings. By evening, he had helped build 6 raised beds that would let retired teachers, factory workers, and people who had survived things he could not imagine grow tomatoes, lettuce, and herbs that would matter more than any project he had managed in his previous life. Valerie found him at day's end, examining his bleeding palms with an expression that suggested he was rethinking life choices. "You coming back tomorrow?" Matt looked at his hands, blood that proved effort, and pain that taught lessons. "Yes, why?" "You clearly are not built for this, because this matters. Your work actually helps actual people in actual ways. That is more than I can say about anything I have done." Valerie's expression softened incrementally. "You get that everyone here is suspicious of people like you. People from comfortable lives think they will save us with their newfound consciousness. I am not trying to save anyone. I am figuring out if I am worth saving. That is less arrogant than most." Valerie handed him a tube of antibiotic ointment for your hands. "Be here tomorrow at 7. We are doing intake interviews with families applying for housing assistance. You will observe and learn how to listen without trying to solve." Matt returned the next day, the day after, and the one following that. He showed up early and stayed late, not because he was trying to impress anyone, but because the work was endless, and every hour he contributed meant something got done that would not have otherwise. He learned to listen to stories that broke his heart. Families living in cars, children sleeping in shelters, people working 3 jobs and still unable to afford apartments in a city that had decided they did not deserve space. He met Jasmine, a woman who worked overnight stocking shelves so she could be home when her kids returned from school, who was facing eviction because her landlord had decided the neighborhood was ready for development that did not include her. Matt helped her fill out paperwork for emergency assistance, sat with her while she cried from exhaustion and terror, and learned that sometimes helping meant just being present. At the same time, people suffered because suffering witnessed was less isolating than suffering alone. He met Benjamin, a veteran whose disability checks did not cover rent in a city that had gotten expensive while he had been overseas, having his life destroyed for reasons politicians never adequately explained. Matt helped Benjamin navigate systems designed to exhaust people into giving up, learned that those systems were not broken. They were working exactly as intended to exclude people deemed inconvenient. He met Elena, a woman escaping violence who needed housing that her abuser could not find, who trusted Riverside because they had never betrayed anyone's location, who looked at Matt with suspicion until he proved through weeks of consistent presence that he was not going to disappoint her like every other man had. Months passed. Matt stopped counting them because counting suggested he was waiting for this phase to end, to upgrade back to something better. This was his life now. Minimal pay required careful budgeting, work that exhausted him, a purpose that sustained him in ways ambition never had. He discovered he was good at certain things when ego was not driving his performance. He could explain complicated processes in language that made sense to people intimidated by deliberately complex forms. He could advocate for clients in meetings with officials who had learned to ignore poor people but could not quite ignore Matt's polite, relentless insistence that people deserved dignity. He got promoted, if promotion was the right word for taking on more responsibility without corresponding pay increases. Valerie made him the lead organizer for a housing development project, converting abandoned buildings into affordable units for families on waiting lists that stretched beyond hope. The work was tedious, including permits and codes, negotiations with contractors who wanted to charge too much, and city officials who wanted to approve too little. Matt threw himself into the tedium because tedium was where real change lived, in details most people found too boring to master. One evening, working late in the warehouse office, Matt drafted a proposal for innovative funding to let Riverside purchase properties before developers could gentrify them out of reach. He spent hours researching comparable models, building budgets, and crafting language that might convince foundations and donors that prevention was cheaper than emergency intervention. He submitted the proposal to funding competitions. Most rejected it immediately. 3 asked for more information. 1, a small foundation focused on community-led development, invited Riverside to present. Matt worked with Valerie and their tiny team to prepare a presentation centered on actual resident voices instead of savior narratives. They brought Jasmine, Benjamin, and Elena to tell their own stories and explain what affordable housing meant in their own words. They won the funding. Not enough to solve everything, but enough to start, enough to matter. The night they received confirmation, Valerie bought cheap champagne and gathered the team in the warehouse that had become their shared home. "This is because of you," she told Matt, raising her plastic cup. "Your proposal got us here." "This is because of all of us," Matt corrected. "I just wrote down what everyone else was already doing." Valerie smiled. "You have learned something. What is that?" "How to get out of your own way." Matt thought about that phrase constantly afterward. He gets out of his own way, stops the performance of importance, and ceases the need to be central to every narrative, learning that contribution did not require recognition to have value. For years rebuilt a person more thoroughly than 4 decades of comfortable existence ever could. Matt stood in a community center that Riverside had renovated from an abandoned church into a vibrant gathering space, watching children play in the after-school program he had helped develop. The walls held art created by residents. The shelves contained books donated by people who understood that reading was resistance. The rooms buzzed with programs that proved community was built through attention and consistency rather than grand interventions. Valerie approached with papers that meant something new needed handling. "We got the notification. The city is considering our expansion proposal, the one for permanent supportive housing. That is the one. They want us to present next month. Full council meeting." Matt took the papers, scanned the requirements, extensive documentation, data analysis, and community impact projections. It was precisely the kind of detailed work that made most people's eyes glaze over, but where real change lived. "I will get started on the research tonight." "You mean we will get started?" Valerie corrected. "You still occasionally slide back into solo hero mode." Matt laughed, genuine and self-aware. "Fair. We will get started. Want to draft the outline together tomorrow?" "Better." The expansion proposal represented a massive scope increase. Riverside wanted to create housing that provided shelter and integrated support services for people experiencing chronic homelessness, as well as medical care, mental health support, job training, and community building. The model worked everywhere it had been implemented, but it required upfront investment, which made politicians nervous despite long-term savings. Matt spent weeks coordinating with team members, gathering stories from residents whose lives had been transformed by stable housing. and assembling data that proved human dignity was also fiscal responsibility. He reached out to experts nationally, building a coalition of support that demonstrated this was not experimental, but proven. He worked late most nights, and his studio apartment became a command center of documents, research, and determination. He had learned to live on minimal sleep, substitute coffee for meals, and push himself beyond comfortable limits because the work mattered more than his comfort. One evening, his phone rang with a number he did not recognize. "Matt Mercer speaking. This is Diane Sullivan. I work with Klein Industries. Miss Cleany asked me to reach out regarding your organization's expansion proposal." Matt's heart stopped functioning briefly. "I am sorry. What?" "Ms. Cleany has been reviewing community development initiatives across the city. Your work with Riverside came to her attention. She would like to discuss potential partnership opportunities." "Partnership opportunities?" Matt repeated, his brain trying to process that Linda, his Linda, the woman he had loved and lost and learned from, had been watching his work. "Miss Cleany would like to schedule a preliminary meeting if you are interested. There are no commitments. It is just a conversation about possible alignment between Riverside's objectives and Klein's community investment goals." Matt looked around his apartment, at the life he had built from rubble, at the work that had saved him by giving him purpose beyond himself. Meeting Linda again terrified him. Facing her, knowing what he now understood about both of them, felt impossible. But refusing would be cowardice, and he had spent 4 years learning courage. "When would Miss Cleany like to meet?" "Are you available next Tuesday, 10 in the morning?" "I will make myself available." Diane provided details. Not the corporate tower where he had been destroyed, but a coffee shop, the same one where he and Linda had their first real date, where he had brought wild flowers wrapped in newspaper, where everything had started before it ended. After the call ended, Matt sat motionless for 20 minutes. Then he called Valerie. "Klein Industries wants to meet about a potential partnership." Valerie was quiet, likely processing implications. "Linda Cleany, the woman who—" "Yes," Matt interrupted. "This could be amazing for Riverside. Their resources could transform everything we are trying to do." "I know. But there is a history that makes this complicated." "There is history," Matt said. "Extensive history. But I will not let my past mistakes compromise Riverside's future opportunities. I will go to this meeting and represent our work professionally, whatever exists." The summit filled a convention center with people who shaped cities through decisions made in rooms most citizens would never enter. Matt stood backstage reviewing notes, nervous energy thrumming through his body. 4 years of presenting to hostile city councils had taught him that terror could become stronger if you cared more about the message than the messenger. "You are on in 5, a stage manager said. Matt nodded, straightened his tie, and walked toward the wings. His presentation slot was late afternoon when attention flagged. Matt had learned that disadvantageous slots could be advantageous if your content mattered. The introduction came, polite applause from an audience applauding all day. Matt walked on stage into lights that erased the audience. "4 years ago, I was fired from a job I thought defined me," he began without preamble. "It was the best thing that has ever happened to me, because it forced me to learn what matters." The audience stirred. People checking phones looked up. Matt's advanced slides show Riverside's work, not abstract statistics, but actual humans with names and stories. Helena, Benjamin, and Jasmine, whose lives proved that housing was not a commodity but a foundation for everything else. He spoke for 20 minutes, balancing statistics with stories, proving that housing advocacy was not idealism but a practical strategy. He talked about centering resident voices instead of imposing expert solutions. The applause when he finished was engaged, sustained. People had actually listened. Matt fielded questions afterward from officials asking about replication, from funders wanting proposals. When he saw her, he talked with a city councilwoman about zoning reforms. Linda stood at the back in a sharp charcoal suit, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Her attention was focused entirely on Matt. Their eyes met across the room, and Matt felt time slow enough to count his heartbeats. He finished his conversation professionally, then walked toward Linda with measured steps. "Miss Cleany?" He kept his voice professional. "Mr. Mercer, excellent presentation. Your work has evolved significantly. I learned from a thorough teacher." Something flickered in Linda's eyes. "There is a private reception tonight for major donors and keynote speakers. You are invited." She handed him an embossed invitation, her fingers not quite touching his. "I will be there," Matt said. The reception was held in a penthouse ballroom overlooking the city. Matt arrived in his best suit and engaged genuinely with attendees, discussing projects, sharing information, and listening. He had learned that networking was relational, not transactional. 2 hours in, Matt stepped onto the balcony for air. The city spread below like promises written in light. "You have become good at this," Matt turned. Linda stood at the balcony's far end, holding a glass of wine untouched. "Good at what?" "Being present without performing. You used to network like you were collecting trophies. Now you talk to people like they are actually people." Matt moved closer. "I learned that people respond better when you are interested in them than when you are interested in what they can do for you. Most people never know that." They stood silently, the city's ambient noise providing a soundtrack to unspoken thoughts. "I do not expect forgiveness," Matt said finally, "but I need you to know I proved myself not to win you back, to become someone I could respect." "Why now?" Linda's question was gentle but direct. "Why this attempt?" "Because the first 3 times I was still trying to reclaim what I lost. Tonight is not about me. It is about showing you I finally understand what you wanted to teach me in that boardroom." "What did I try to teach you?" "That respect is earned. That love is not about saving someone or being saved. You see people for who they are, not who you need them to be." Matt's voice steadied. "I spent 4 years becoming someone who deserves to stand in the same room as you. Not because of status or wealth, but because of character." Linda looked out at the city. When she finally spoke, her voice carried years of weight. "Do you know how many men approached me after we ended? Men with credentials, with wealth. I imagine many, hundreds. Do you know how many I let past superficial conversation?" Matt shook his head. "None. They forgot how to be arrogant because none had been humbled so thoroughly. None of them learned that strength is partnership, not dominance." She stepped closer, tears threatening behind her control. "You did something remarkable, Matt. You proved yourself to yourself. That is the only proof that ever matters. I do not deserve another chance." "No," Linda agreed quietly, "but you have earned the right to try." Linda took one more step, closing the distance to intimacy. "When I met you in that gallery, I saw fire in your eyes. That man was beautiful, but buried under an ego so thick I could not reach him. I had to let him destroy himself so someone better could be born. And now I see someone who learned that strength is vulnerability, that influence is service, that love is seeing someone fully and choosing them anyway." Matt's hands moved to Linda's waist slowly. She leaned into his touch like she had waited 4 years for permission. "I cannot promise I will never fail you again," Matt said. "I do not want promises. I want a partnership." "Then let us build." Matt knelt on the balcony, not in supplication, but in gratitude. "I prove myself," he said, looking up. "Not for you, for me." Linda's hand came to her mouth, "Because you cared enough to shatter me when coddling would have been easier." Tears escaped down her cheeks. "Stand up," she whispered. Matt rose. Linda's hands found his face, trembling fingers tracing the changes time had written into his features. "That is the man I fell in love with," she breathed. "Not the one who promised to take care of me, the one who learned us to take care of each other." Their foreheads touched, breathing synchronized. "This will not be easy," Linda said. 4 years of hurt stand between us." "I know. People will question why I took you back. Let them. Then we start here, tonight. Not as who we were, but as who we have become." Matt kissed her, not desperate but certain, not claiming but offering. When they broke apart, Linda kept her arms around his neck. "4 years ago, I thought I was offering you my world," Matt said quietly. "I was wrong. What I should have offered was myself, including the parts that needed breaking to be rebuilt better. Those broken parts are what made you whole. They stood together, the city sprawling beneath them. Inside, music played, and important people conducted essential conversations. But here, two souls who had been shattered found each other again, not as savior and saved, but as equals. "I love you," Matt said. "I love all of you. The influence I could not see before, the strength I mistook for weakness, the extraordinary human you have always been." Linda kissed him again. "I love you too. I love who you became when the world stripped away everything you thought you were, and forced you to discover what you actually are." They eventually returned to the reception and entered together. People noticed, but neither cared about those conversations anymore. The night ended with promises to talk tomorrow, to begin the slow work of rebuilding trust. Matt returned to his studio apartment, which felt less like a limitation and more like a launching pad. Linda returned to her penthouse, which felt less like isolation and more like a home waiting to be shared. The city slept and dreamed its million dreams. Somewhere in those dreams, a man and a woman who had learned that love without respect was fiction chose to try again, not to recapture what had been lost, but to build something they had never achieved. Partnership between equals who had earned their equality through fire. And sometimes, if you are fortunate and brave, the truth is enough. The morning after the summit, Matt woke in his studio apartment to sunlight filtering through a cracked window, casting jagged patterns on the floor. The space felt different now, not just a place to exist, but a foundation for something new. He made coffee with the same cheap grounds he had used for years, but the bitterness tasted like resolve today. The meeting with Linda lingered in his mind, not as a resolution, but as a beginning, fragile and heavy with possibility. He sat at his small table, which wobbled unless propped with a folded piece of cardboard, and opened his laptop. The proposal for Klein Industries needed to be drafted, a task that felt like walking a tightrope over a canyon of personal history. Matt emailed Valerie, outlining the next steps for Riverside's expansion plan and the potential partnership. He wrote that we need to refine our budget projections and timeline. Klein's resources could change everything, but we must show them our work stands independently. Valerie responded within the hour. "Agreed. Let us meet this afternoon. Bring every scrap of data you have. We cannot afford to look unprepared." Matt spent the morning gathering documents, resident testimonies, and impact reports. He included Jasmine's story of finding stability for her children, Benjamin's account of reclaiming dignity through housing, and Elena's quiet gratitude for a home where fear no longer lived. These were not just stories, but evidence that Riverside's mission worked. The meeting with Valerie and the team was held in the warehouse office, surrounded by stacks of files and the faint smell of sawdust from ongoing construction projects. Valerie paced as they reviewed the proposal, her intensity a reminder that this partnership could redefine their organization's future. "We are not just asking for money," she said. "We are asking for trust. Klein Industries does not partner with dreamers. They partner with builders. Show them we build." Matt nodded, scribbling notes. He had learned to listen before speaking, to let the work speak louder than his voice. The team spent hours refining the proposal, trimming excess language, sharpening data points, and ensuring every sentence carried weight. By evening, they had a solid draft, a blueprint for housing that could transform lives. Matt sent it to Diane Sullivan, Linda's assistant, with a professional message that carried an undercurrent of hope. Riverside looks forward to discussing how our goals align with Klein Industries' vision. The following days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and revisions. Diane responded with detailed questions about implementation, timelines, and scalability. Matt and Valerie answered each one meticulously, knowing that every response was a test of their credibility. Matt thought of Linda, not as the woman he had loved, but as a partner in a shared mission. Someone whose influence could amplify their work. It was a shift that felt both necessary and disorienting. On Tuesday, Matt returned to the coffee shop where it had all begun. Linda was already seated at the same corner table. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes were sharp. She wore a simple blouse and skirt, an understated elegance that reminded Matt of the woman he had met in the gallery, yet now carried the weight of her true self. No assistants, no entourage, just Linda and a folder of notes. Matt sat across from her, clutching his own files like a shield. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. "Your proposal is impressive," Linda replied, skipping pleasantries. "It is ambitious but grounded. My team sees potential, but there are gaps we need to address." Matt nodded, ready for critique. He had learned that feedback was not failure, but a chance to build stronger. "Lay it out. What needs work?" Linda opened her folder, her movements precise. "Your budget assumes consistent funding streams, but you have not accounted for economic downturns. Housing projects stall when grants dry up. We need contingency plans." Matt scribbled notes, grateful for her clarity. He said, "We can model scenarios for reduced funding and prioritize core services." Good. Next, your timeline is aggressive. Permitting a loan could delay you by 6 months. Have you engaged with city regulators? "Not deeply enough," Matt admitted. "We have contacts, but we need stronger relationships." "Klein can facilitate introductions," Linda said. "Our network includes officials who can expedite approvals without cutting corners." Matt felt a spark of possibility. That would be a game changer. "It is strategic," Linda said, echoing her words from their last meeting. "Stable communities benefit everyone. This is not charity, it is an investment." They spent an hour dissecting the proposal, Linda's questions cutting to the heart of logistical challenges, while Matt countered with solutions rooted in Riverside's experience. The conversation was professional and focused, but beneath it ran a current of something unspoken. Every glance, every pause, carried the weight of their shared history. Matt noticed how Linda's fingers traced the edge of her coffee cup, a habit he remembered from their early days. She saw the scars on his hands, proof of his work. As they wrapped up, Linda leaned back, her expression softening slightly. "You have changed, Matt, not just in your work, but in how you carry yourself. You listen now." "I had to learn," he said quietly. "I had good teachers, even if the lessons hurt." Linda's eyes held his for a moment, and he saw a flicker of the woman who had once believed in him. "I am glad you learned," she said, "for Riverside's sake, and maybe for yours." They agreed to a 2-week follow-up meeting with Klein's whole team. Matt left the coffee shop feeling lighter, not because the partnership was guaranteed, but because he had faced Linda as an equal, not a supplicant. He walked back to Riverside, the city alive around him. Its noise was a reminder that life moved forward even when you were not ready. Over the next week, Matt and Valerie prepared for the formal presentation. They rehearsed with the team, ensuring every member could speak to their role in the project. Jasmine volunteered to share her story, her voice steady as she described how housing had given her children a future. Benjamin offered data from his experience, showing how stability reduced healthcare costs. Elena, quieter but resolute, spoke of safety as a human right. Matt watched them, pride swelling in his chest, not for himself, but for the community they had built. Matt sat in his apartment the night before the presentation, reviewing notes. His phone buzzed with a message from Linda. "Good luck tomorrow. I know you will represent Riverside well." Matt stared at the words, feeling the weight of her trust. He typed back, "Thank you, we are ready to show what we can do together." He slept better that night than in years, not because the past was erased, but because the future felt possible. The partnership with Klein was a chance to build something lasting for Riverside, and those who needed it most. It could be a chance to build something with Linda, not as who they had been, but as who they had become. The morning of the presentation dawned crisp, the city waking under a sky with the first hints of winter. Matt arrived at Klein Industries headquarters an hour early, carrying a folder of notes and a quiet certainty earned through years of work. The building towered above the street, its glass facade reflecting a world that seemed both familiar and distant. He wore a suit that fit well but carried no pretense, a choice that mirrored the man he had become, grounded, purposeful, unburdened by the need to impress. Valerie and the Riverside team joined him in the lobby, their faces a mix of determination and nerves. Jasmine clutched a printed copy of her speech, her fingers trembling slightly. Benjamin adjusted his tie, his posture straight despite the weight of his story. Elena stood quietly, eyes scanning the room as if memorizing every detail. "We have got this," Matt said, his voice steady. "We are not here to sell a dream. We are here to show what we have already built." They were escorted to a conference room on the 38th floor, where Linda and her team waited. She stood at the head of a long table, dressed in a navy suit that spoke of authority without ostentation. Her expression was professional, but Matt caught a fleeting warmth in her eyes when they met his, a silent acknowledgement of the path that had brought them here. "Thank you for coming," she said, addressing the group. "We are eager to hear how Riverside's vision aligns with our community investment goals." Matt began the presentation, his voice clear and measured. He outlined Riverside's expansion plan, emphasizing its focus on permanent, supportive housing. He spoke of data, cost savings from stable housing, and reduced strain on public services. But he quickly handed the floor to the team. Jasmine spoke first, her voice growing stronger as she described how Riverside's housing had given her children a safe place to grow, a chance at a future she had once thought impossible. Benjamin followed, his words precise, detailing how housing had restored his dignity and reduced his reliance on emergency care. Elena's voice was soft but unwavering, explaining how a secure home had freed her from fear, allowing her to rebuild her life. The Klein team listened intently, some taking notes, others leaning forward, drawn in by stories that carried the weight of lived experience. Matt closed the presentation with a call to partnership, not as charity, but as a strategic investment in a stronger city. Questions came from Linda's team, sharp and detailed, probing timelines, budgets, and scalability. Matt and Valerie answered with confidence, their preparation evident in every response. Linda remained silent for most of the discussion, her gaze moving between the speakers and her notes, her expression unreadable. When the questions ended, Linda stood. "Your proposal is compelling," she said. "Riverside's work demonstrates measurable impact, and your focus on resident voices sets you apart. We will need a few weeks to review the details, but I am optimistic about moving forward." Matt felt a rush of relief, tempered by the knowledge that this was only the beginning. "Thank you," he said. "We look forward to the next steps." As the teams exchanged handshakes, Linda approached Matt. "Can we speak privately?" she asked. He nodded, following her to a smaller office adjacent to the conference room. The door closed behind them, muffling the sounds of the departing group. The city stretched below through a wide window, its skyline a reminder of the stakes they both carried. "You did well," Linda said, her tone professional but softer now. "Your team trusts you, and it shows." "They trust the work," Matt replied. "I help them tell the story." Linda smiled faintly, a crack in her composed exterior. "You have learned humility. That is no small thing." "It cost enough," Matt said, his voice steady but honest. "I had to lose everything to understand what mattered." Linda moved to the window, her hands clasped behind her back. "I watched your work from a distance these past years," she said. "I saw Riverside grow, saw the reports, and saw the outcomes. I told myself it was professional curiosity, but it was more than that. I wanted to know if the man I loved could become someone who saw me." Matt's breath caught, but he stayed silent, letting her words fill the space. "When I read your proposal, I saw a man who had learned to listen, serve, and build without needing to be the hero. That is the man I hoped you could be." Linda turned to face him, her eyes searching his. "But I also needed to know if I could trust you again, not just as a partner in work, but as someone who could share my world without breaking under its weight." Matt stepped closer, careful not to cross an unspoken boundary. "I do not expect trust to come easily," he said. "I know what I broke. 4 years is insufficient to erase that. But I am here not to prove I am worthy of you, but to show I am worthy of myself. If that earns your trust, I will spend every day honoring it." Linda's expression softened, and momentarily, the woman from the gallery, who had seen beauty in chaos, stood before him. "I believe you," she said quietly, "and that scares me, because thinking you means risking everything again." "Then let us risk it together," Matt said, his voice low but certain. "Not as who we were, but as who we are now, equals, building something real." She nodded, a small gesture that felt like a door opening. "We will start with the partnership," she said. "Riverside and Klein are working together, but beyond that, I want to try. I want to see if we can rebuild what we lost, not as a fairy tale, but as something more substantial, grounded in truth. Matt felt his chest tighten, not with fear but with hope, fragile and hard-won. I want that too, he said. I want to know all of you, the parts I was too blind to see. Linda reached out, her hand brushing his briefly, a touch that carried years of longing and caution. Then we begin here, she said. Step by step, no promises, just choices. They stood in silence, the city humming below, its rhythm a backdrop to a moment that felt like a new dawn. They returned to the conference room, where Valerie and the team packed up. Linda addressed them briefly, promising a decision within weeks and offering resources to refine their plan. The Riverside team left with a sense of cautious optimism, their voices animated as they discussed next steps. Matt lingered, catching Linda's eye one last time before leaving. "See you soon," he said. She nodded. Soon. Matt walks out into the city, its streets alive and full of possibilities. He thought of the years that had brought him here, the losses that had taught him, the work that had saved him. He thought of Linda, not as a dream to chase but as a partner to meet as an equal. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, uncertainty felt like freedom. They had chosen truth, and truth was enough to start.